Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 197, we sit down with Paul Henry, founder and executive director of the East End Student Film Project and president of Tax Reduction Services. Paul's career has spanned a wide range of fields from children's television and media production to business, environmental advocacy, and arts education, all connected by a deep commitment to creativity, community, and learning. After discovering the North Fork years ago, Paul quickly became part of its creative and civic fabric. Through his company Tax Reduction Services, he's helped countless homeowners navigate the complexities of property taxes, while his work with the East End Student Film Project has opened doors for local students to explore filmmaking and storytelling. In our conversation, we talk about his early life and career, the inspiration behind his many ventures, from student film and photography to the live stream OspreyZone project, and his thoughts on the roles of arts, culture, and sustainable growth in shaping the future of Greenport and the wider North Fork community. So I hope you enjoy episode 197 with Paul Henry. This episode was recorded July 8th, 2025.
Are we live?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to turn this around for 1 minute.
Sure.
I'm not really sure what you're doing, what your project is specifically and exactly. So tell me a little bit about what we're doing here today.
Well, we're recording somewhat of like an oral history, but of people that are living on the North Fork, Greenport, about their life and how they came out here and how they've gotten involved in the community. So I've been bringing people in throughout the last year and a half to discuss their life and what they enjoy about the community out here.
I think it's great what you're doing now. Is the intention to become a historical archival collection for eternity? Pretty much?
Pretty much,
cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yes, almost like a time capsule into this time.
No, I think it's great, and I applaud your efforts, and let's get started. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And so in the beginning, I'd like to just ask the people that come in if you can give us a little background about yourself, where you grew up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start. Well, I was born in Forest Hills, grew up in Great Neck, went through school in Great Neck for up to 7th grade, and then I was, my father was very formally educated in London, and he thought that prep school was where I belonged, so I was sent to prep school, which was definitely the darker days of my life. I hated prep school. Eventually got back to high school in Great Neck, which is where I say that life began for me. And I had a lot of interesting experiences that during those years. None of them were really very academic. I wasn't very academically oriented at all. In fact, I was, this was the 60s, and a lot of things were going on in the country. Vietnam was a main thing. Nixon was a main thing. Civil rights. And at 15 years old, I went to Woodstock. I was probably the youngest kid without his parents there, or close to it, and came back to a very different attitude of the world in the 60s, closed out the 60s, went to a school called Friends World College, which was a Quaker school, and it was basically a independent study school where you proposed a project and went out and did it. If you wanted to study primitive culture, you didn't go to the library. You went to Africa and lived with the culture there. So I studied photography and journalism in Madrid, and I was actually in Berkeley for an orientation to the school, which was during the People Park riots, and I started my photography career, which I'm sure we'll get to later. I left for many years to go back to school. I ended up at the University of Arizona for 4 years studying sciences, physiological psychology. I did my own research there, which led me to Rockefeller University, which is where I was studying brain sciences. And then we had the beginning of the computer revolution, and we started getting computers to analyze data, to collect data, to run our experiments, actually, even automate our experiments, process control, and that sort of thing. So I got more interested in the computers than the rat brains. And I went on to the computer business really before there was an industry, the very beginning. I took a year off to go to Hawaii, University of Hawaii, and studied electrical engineering, digital computer technology. Came back to New York and went right into the computer business and was in the computer business for many years. Eventually designing custom application software for businesses and installing computers and specializing in networks and multi-user computer configurations before they were really too widespread. It was really kind of fighting IBM mainframes at the time, but lo and behold, the microcomputer shined and came through and was the predominant technology that really ran the computer industry up to today. Let's see, where did I leave off? I must have left off some stuff.
Was there anything back when for growing up?
Well, growing up, I was always, like in high school, I was always into the sciences. Mm-hmm. I remember we had a computer lab that was way ahead of its time. We had a little teletype machine that talked to some mainframe at BOCES, I think it was. And all the kids, all the nerds, maybe I was one of them at the school, stood online to just get their hands on this keyboard and type little simple basic programs. I remember the first program I ever wrote was a craps game that played craps with you. And I think that was probably what got me started in computers. And, one of the things that I always feel strongly about is how my life has just been kind of like fitting into pieces. I had all this background, so many different opportunities, educational opportunities. Eventually in college, I was very academic. And I was able to take all the pieces, all the little bits that I'd learned over the years and kind of apply them. They fit together like a jigsaw puzzle eventually when I got into my business of having all the computer skills I had to prosper and to get successful in my property tax business.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you wanted to talk about, because you mentioned boarding school and why you kind of did with this dislike for it.
I've never really been, I never really liked all the structure. Mm-hmm. It was, there were some, it was a tough gig for me in a lot of ways. I didn't like being away from home. It was an all-boys school, and I was just coming into my own interest in girls, and it just was the kids can be pretty cruel. Mm-hmm. I really wanted a little more freedom. I really, every minute of every day was kind of planned out for you, and it just wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. The structure wasn't really my cup of tea. Let's put it that way.
And going back to the public school was a little much more freer and back home. But were you doing photography at that time?
Well, that's what's interesting, because I started photography at prep school.
Oh, okay.
That was the one thing I think that it gave me that I appreciated, and I sort of left it behind for 40 or 50 years. And now I'm very much back into photography, as you know, and it's kind of like, since my retirement, it's really all I want to do and all I'm doing is just, moving in a direction and just exploring a lot of different avenues. Photography is quite a wide subject, and I am just, really enjoying it. And I think heading somewhere, I'm not sure where, but here I go.
Yes. And you mentioned going off to college and then coming back to New York. Were you living in New York City?
I never lived in New York City. Maybe actually when I was a kid, my father remarried a woman who had an apartment in the city, and we lived there for a summer. But that was in between prep schools when I was away during the school year. But I always really lived in Great Neck. Great Neck was really my home, and it continued to be even after school. My first house I bought in Great Neck, and I actually met a girl out here in Greenport and brought her back to Great Neck, and then now we've been back to Greenport for 45 years.
Wow. And so when was the first time you when was the first time you kind of discovered the North Fork of Greenport?
Now that's a story I like to tell. I'm sitting in my kitchen just one Saturday morning, I remember, and one of my oldest friends, Paul Wexler, comes knocking on the door, and he says, "Come on, my parents just bought a place out in East Marion." And I said, "Where is that?" And he goes, "Come on." And we literally just like 10 minutes later, I'm hitching down the Long Island Expressway with him, and we hitched all the way out to Greenport from Great Neck. And Paul's father owned Atlantic Record Company, Jerry Wexler, and he had built and fixed up a really nice house in East Marion. And you might have heard stories about the Rolling Stones and all sorts of Aretha Franklin and everybody else in between were all out there during those days. And I started coming out. Paul's mother, Shirley Wexler, was a really good friend of my mother's and a really good friend of my family's. And she had married this guy, Tommy Apria, who was a fisherman and a flim-flam man in every regard. He was a chauffeur and a captain and a bodyguard and a chef for Jerry Wexler when he was first here. And he ended up marrying Shirley Wexler, Jerry's wife, and he was a fisherman, and he had draggers and all sorts of cool boats and things, and I used to come out for the summers and fish with him and actually even deliver fish. We used to catch flounder and fillet them and sell it to all the restaurants, and this is all when I was a kid going to college and coming out here for the summers.
What year was that around?
Oh gosh, that would have been like 70, 71, 72, somewhere in there.
And were you going mostly to East Marion? Did you come into Greenport at that time?
Well, there wasn't much here. In fact, interestingly, the what is it? The beach, American Beach.
Oh, yes.
American Beach used to be the Cinnamon Tree, and before that it was Jacob's Ladder or something like that. And actually Tommy of Shirley Wexler and Tommy was one of the owners with this guy. What was his name? A lawyer, had a house in Orient. I'll think of his name in a second. And they had that restaurant. And then May Watson bought the whole complex and turned it into the Cinnamon Tree, which was really the hottest bar in Greenport for at least 10 or 20 years. And that's where I met Sue, who I've been with the last 45 years. Sue Krilling and I have lived together for 45 years, first in Great Neck for 5 years, and now in Greenport for 40 years. We raised her kids here in Greenport. They went to Greenport High School. But back then, there wasn't really a lot of choices. There were a couple of bars, and the Cinnamon Tree was one of them. The Rum Line was another one. And then there was Myers.
That's where Whiskey Wind is now.
That's correct. That's where Whiskey Wind is now. And
Mitchell's was already
Mitchell's was already burnt
so
down.
it was just kind of empty.
And then there was Kokomo's.
Yes.
The guy built another place, Kokomo's, there that I guess it was just knocked down when they built the park.
Yeah. So there wasn't there was some bars and
Yeah,
but it seemed kind of
there were, there's a couple of restaurants. The Coronet was like, lobster chowder every weekend and fresh made donuts, and there wasn't a lot going on. I have to admit that I really liked Greenport back then. It was kind of like sleepy, run down, and a secret of a place.
Yes.
And of course, none of that is true today.
That's changed,
But I really liked it back then. Not that I don't like it now. I love it now. I care about it greatly. But people complain about, it was this and that. I loved it back then. Because the docks, the Claudio's docks were filled with fishing boats. Benny Rose used to have 3 big fishing boats, and all his friends from the Carolinas used to come in. They were packing fish every day off of the Claudio's docks, and it was really something that I miss.
And people would talk about that they can smell the
bunkers.
The bunker.
Oh yeah, they used to process bunkers here, and they had oyster company.
Yes,
and it
where
was
a lot of the
and a lot of it was before that time that
yes.
was dying. I mean, there's a lot of controversy over the Bayman, the demise of the Bayman here. I'm happy to report that I actually have a little marina in town on Sterling Street that I have a couple of guys there who are still fishing. And in fact, I just went down there and he had buckets full of porgies that they were catching in nets. And so there's still a little of it going on.
Yeah.
It's not, and the scallop season, which used to be really big. I mean, when the scallop season opened up every year, the town pretty much shut down, and everybody had a piece of the scallop business. There wasn't anybody who didn't either catch them, clean them, or eat them.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Someone said that was up until kind of like 1999 or.
Since then there's been a couple of like partial harvests, but the prices. I think last year we were paying $35 a pound for scallops, but they're so good, you got to get a pound of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, I remember when they were $5 a pound, and you could buy 10 pounds and put them in your freezer. They freeze really well.
Yeah. And then, so you eventually made the decision to come out here full time.
Right. What happened was that we were at the Cinnamon Tree one night, and Sue's really good friend, Joan Hamilton, says to us, "I got to show you this house." And we said, "Okay, great." And we didn't even remember. She came and woke us up. We probably got home around 2 or 3 in the morning. She woke us up at 9 o'clock because she was having an open house, but she really wanted us to see this house. And we walked into this house, the McCann Farm where I live now, and I went into one side of the house. Sue went into the other, and we kind of met in the kitchen. And I just turned to her, and I don't know what got into me, but I said, "Sold." And I bought it for the asking price, which I thought was a really good price. And, it's kind of like, if you look at the values today, it's kind of a joke what I paid for it. I'm not even going to get into that.
Yeah.
But, over the years, we put a lot of money into it. We've tried to maintain it and keep it as original as we could. But yeah, so we, this big, beautiful house just kind of called our name and never let us go. So we sold our house in Great Neck. A tiny little house where you could practically touch the neighbors out the sides of the house. Yeah. And for pretty much dollar for dollar traded it for this big, beautiful house in Greenport, because that was the disparity of the values back then. Yes. And didn't look back. We came out, we put the kids in school here, and I think we were all the better for it.
Yeah, because we're going to get to it later, but with the Arts Center. But could you talk about even what was going on with that at that time, with the theater?
Well, back then, we moved out full-time here in 85. But we were coming out here, Sue and I were living in Great Neck since 1980 or 81. And we were coming out here for the weekends. Sue had a family house out here that we used for the weekends and for, whenever we could get out here during the summer. But when we moved out here full time, I was kind of still in the computer business, but I didn't really, I had a really good client in Great Neck. I had a really good client in St. Martin that I got from a bunch of guys in Sag Harbor who had started a job and didn't want to finish it. And I was shopping around I started selling computers out on the North Fork, and I sold a lot of computers and took care of a lot of friends and built up a business. But I always, I was still into writing custom software, computerizing businesses. I would go into a business and I would look at what their needs were, and I would just sit down with them for the next 6 months to a year and write custom software. And that was how I was making a living. But I always wanted to have my own business. I always wanted to write software for my own company. And when we bought the house, we were getting killed by property taxes. It was absolutely devastating to find out that I was escrowing $1,000 a month that I didn't have. I was putting it on credit cards. In between the two houses, I had to take a loan out, and back then it was like 11.75% interest in 1985. So I took a loan out, and it was killing me. And what I didn't really understand that I was going to have to escrow my property taxes, which weren't due for another year, and it was just killing me. So I started thinking about it and looking into it and learning about it and finding out that there was this best kept secret down at town hall was the grievance process. The grievance process was a New York State mandated way for somebody could have their property taxes reviewed. And I went down to town hall, and at the time there was this, institutional attitude down there, get out of here, kid, before we raise your taxes. And that's essentially the message I got. And I did. I got out of there. I was afraid they were going to raise my taxes. And then I remember sitting at a Christmas party. In fact, I remember it was Jed Claus's house, and it was Eric Bressler and I were talking. And they said, well, didn't they tell you about the grievance process? And I said, no, what's that? And they said, oh, they're supposed to tell you about the grievance process. So I went back. I learned a little bit about the grievance process, and I found out that, there's not only was there a way to remedy high property taxes, but I was way overassessed. And so I went and filed my first grievance and got a 25% reduction, which was the maximum reduction. And the next year I got 15% more because I was limited the first year to 25%, and that's how overassessed I was. And along the way I started, The beauty of the story is that I had computer skills, and this is when all the pieces started fitting together, because I was actually in the business of processing data. I was working for Long Island Jewish Hospital and analyzing their records because they were looking to classify diseases for cost purposes, and so I had tape readers. I could read those old big magnetic tapes, and I found out that from the state I could get tax rolls on magnetic tax rolls on these tapes, so I could put them into my computer and start processing them and playing with them. I also found out that I could get sales from the state. They had sales on these computer tapes. So when I started getting the tax rolls and matching the sales into the tax rolls, it was actually pretty simple math. I could determine pretty with high level of confidence who was overassessed, because I knew what the property was worth, and I knew what it should have been taxed at, and I knew what it was being taxed at. So out of all this data, I could pick out all the people that were overassessed. And, the problem was, of course, that I needed a value for that property. So I had it on the sales. So that was my first year. I sent out like 600 letters and got like over 200 responses, which was, nobody believed it in the mail order business. And we got 175 reductions, I think, out of 200 because they were all overassessed. And then, I started thinking about it and said, well, it's not just the sales, the people who have values, current values. I need to, reach out, because that was maybe 2-3% of the market I had sales for. But, I had the other 97-98%. So I started collecting appraisals and different methods to value property, and started spreading out across Long Island. And, the rest is kind of history. In my heyday, I had like 20 people working for me, and we were filing, at one time we were filing 15,000 grievances a year.
Wow.
So and I attribute that completely to my computer skills.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that when I started printing grievance applications and small claims assessment review applications and handing them into the courts, Suffolk County courts and the assessor's offices of all the 10 towns in Suffolk County, it was quite an uproar, because they never saw computer printouts in that volume, and I was filing 15,000 lawsuits a year. Mm-hmm. And that was at the very beginning, when people didn't use computers to fill out those forms. Mm-hmm. So again, my computer skills and strengths were really the key, and these were really skills that I had accumulated little pieces at a time in all my different endeavors previously to that. So I consider that pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm. But that was the business that you've had out here for a long time, tax reduction
Correct.
Services.
Correct.
And that's like you mentioned, has evolved and continued.
Well, actually, I've recently retired.
Okay.
And I ran the business for 35 years,
mm-hmm.
and I got to a point where I was just kind of done. I guess not totally burnt out, but just tired of. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing that, and I was lucky enough to be in a financial position where I could start doing some different things. Mm-hmm. Now, along the way, there's a lot of things that I was involved in the community along the way. I know you want to talk about the East End Student Film Project.
Yes.
And that's a real feather in my cap, I feel. It had an interesting history. Troy Gustafson and myself were very upset with the expansion of the Orient Ferry. They wanted to buy more land and have more parking facilities and put more ferries in and grow and grow and grow. And there was a time when there was a big demonstration and march out by Orient to try to stop that. Now, I don't really know. I think we did stop them to a certain extent. They got limited, but they wanted to expand to an unlimited level, and a lot of the community was not in favor of that. Although I will say that they run a really good and essential service, and I have no problems with anything they're doing. But at the time, we were not happy about their expansion plans. Mm-hmm. And so Troy and I had found out about there were some kids at Mattituck running in a film program. What was his name? John. I forgot the film teacher's name. I might think of it in a minute. But there was a bunch of kids making movies and in a film course in Mattituck. It was before anywhere else was doing anything like that. And we got together with these kids with the intention of getting them to make us a little public service film about the expansion of the ferry. But we really liked these kids. I remember the meeting we had in my den with them, and we were just so impressed with them. We said, "Well, what would you like? What are you missing?" And they said, "We'd like a film festival. We would like a place for the community to see what we're doing." John Rosloff, I think was Rosloff or something like that, was the film teacher, and Troy and I looked at each other and says, "We can do that," and that's what we did. We made a student film festival, mm-hmm. and we reached out to Mattituck, Southold, Riverhead, and also the Ross School in mm-hmm. the Hamptons.
Yes.
And we had a fantastic full house film festival where, it was just really, really so well received. And we did it again the next year. But one of the problems that I had with the whole thing was that I had Southold kids, I had Mattituck kids, I had Riverhead kids, I had Ross School kids, I had no Greenport kids. So I said, so the next logical step was to build a film program for the Greenport kids. But of course, it wasn't just for the Greenport kids, it was for any kids. Yes. But in Greenport attracted a lot of the kids.
Yeah.
And we put together, I think, a really cool program. I ran it for 5 years. That's EESFP, eastendstudentfilmproject.org.
Mm-hmm.
And the final feature was a claymation live action fusion of Aldo's Coffee Shop. And it was really fun. I had 60 kids coming through the studio one summer, and we had 2-week sessions, but I had 3 of them, so it was 6 weeks, and we made that film, and literally 60 kids participated and contributed, and I still get comments. I meet mothers of the kids and the kids themselves, and how it changed their lives. And it was really, I think, one of my highlights in my life to have done this for the community, which I hope we get into today. I'm looking to do again, now that I'm into photography, back to photography. I'm hoping to build a photography program similar to the East End Student Film Project that we did. And by the way, I skipped something because this was about 20 years ago. I ran it for about 5 years. And then my good friend Tony Spiridakis, who I met just by chance one night, came up to our studio and never left. We were having so much fun. But when I retired from my film program, and there was a lot of reasons, but I thought that we had really done a great job for 5 years. Tony had an idea of doing a different film programming. My program was really addressing the local kids, but Tony wanted to really skim the cream off the whole country, and he built a program called Manhattan Film Institute, where for the next 10 years we made literally 250 short films with film students from across the country, across the world even. And it's all on the website manhattanfilminstitute.com. And we really made some magic for 10 years. 250 films. It was a guerrilla style, full immersion, no sleep, just make films, and the kids were put up in the old Silver Sands before they fixed it all up, and we just had the greatest time. It was my favorite part of the year, participating in that program of Tony and Shannon Goldman's, and I must mention Lisa Galuli really ran the program. We all really worked for her.
No, but even I was curious just at that time, because you mentioned that the program you did with the East End Student Project, that was around 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think it started about 20 years ago, ended about 15 years ago. I think that's about right. Okay. And we did a lot of cool stuff, but I left out some parts because every year we had a film festival. We kept on having the film festival for 5 years, and Josh Sapin at the Greenport Theater was kind enough to let me use the theater for the festival. And by the end of the 5 years, most of my students and films from my program were definitely dominating the festival. I mean, that was really kind of the goal. And we had a mixture of local kids and summer kids. And one of the things was that I didn't want there to be any kind of, limitations by expense and price. So I basically supplemented it myself and made the tuition, like I think it was $50 a week, which was not even a fraction of what it cost me to run that program. But it was my privilege and it was really my education. What I learned about making films and just producing films, and was inevitable for all the things that I did afterwards.
But even at that time, if you could touch on Greenport in the 2000s, because people talk about that being a time of change. With Mitchell Park and yeah, and it's there's a lot of components to that question. So
I'm trying to remember. In 2000, okay, I mean that was the year of 9/11, right? That was a heavy duty time for America. But Mitchell Park was already there. Dave Capel had really single-handedly made Mitchell Park, to his credit. There was a lot of controversy over the design of the carousel. In fact, one of the highlights of the whole Mitchell Park saga was an architectural competition that Dave brilliantly arranged. And I remember in the VFW hall was all the submissions. There must have been maybe 15 models of what that park could be. I mean, he put it out to some of the probably renowned architectural firms in the country and the world. I'm sure, I think it was international, and it was just really exciting and cool to have all those different plans. And what happened was it was a little controversial because I believe that in the end the winner did not get the job. I believe it was the third place that got the job, and whoever preference that was, I will leave to somebody else's knowledge.
Yes. But before, because I think I had talking more about the North Fork Arts Center.
Right.
And with that, but were you going to the theater at all before that in the 80s and 90s, or was it?
Well, I mean, yes, but I don't remember the theater as being a other than a quad. Okay. I don't remember going to the theater before it was a quad, and I think that was done in the 70s, if I remember correctly.
They split it up.
But it's so cool to be involved with it now. Let's back up and talk about that a little bit. I'm sure Tony went over it, but Tony is a force to be reckoned with. Tony Spiridakis, he started a winter movie series at the theater. He recognized that the theater was not being used, and he contacted Josh Sapin, and they worked out a deal. And Tony's hands-on, man. He doesn't. Tony will do anything that needs to be done in terms of, like, when the bathrooms need to be cleaned. I mean, Tony is an incredible guy. But he got that furnace working. He put money into new oil tanks. He put a winter series together, and basically it was the beginning of a relationship with Josh Sapin that led to the donation of the theater to the North Fork Arts Center, which I'm on the board on, by the way, and a privilege to be so. The North Fork Arts Center had its origin by running that winter film series, and there was an obvious recognition that the community needed and wanted something more. Josh had bought that theater kind of like as a, I don't know what, he bought the theater because it was such a cool piece of what he was in the production business. He was a mastermind of Showtime, I believe. I don't want to go too far because I'm not exactly sure what his background was, but I know that he was a genius in programming and earned a amazing position and a reputation. And so he bought the theater, and it was probably more like a hobby of his because it was losing money, I'm sure. And eventually, I guess he just got tired of losing the money there. So he closed the theater. The theater was closed before COVID. And, that's when Tony kind of came in and decided that this is the community needs this. And he's very conscientious about serving the community. I'll give him full credit. And so he worked it out with Josh and built a relationship with Josh that led to the North Fork Arts Center, which now is kind of in its second year. We're just starting our second year. There's a lot going on there. We've come a long, long way. We have a long way to go. We have a renovation project that we'd like to do that will add classrooms and a handicapped elevator to get people upstairs to the main theater. We rebuilt the stage. It turned out that the stage that we thought was a stage wasn't really a stage. It was what they called a sound box. When they convert theaters to quads, they have problems with the sound carrying through the walls, and so one of the strategies is to build this buffer in front of the main screen upstairs, which was full of insulation but not enough support. So one of our major expenditures, we had to close the theater and put steel in it. It was a big job, but we made that stage so you could put an elephant on it.
Yeah.
And so we've been really fortunate to have the Brooklyn Ballet and to have concerts and things, and we have a lot of plans to build our events around that stage. And also I'll add that the renovation will put space behind that stage that will be a green room, because performers want to have a little private space, that they can come in and out of. And then behind there will be classrooms or event space or, something else that we can use. Because one of the most important missions, as far as I'm concerned, of the North Fork Arts Center is our education and instructional programs. We really want to be that for the community, and I know the library does a lot of cool things too, and we don't want to overlap with you guys here.
No,
but we have a lot of arts kinds of things that we want to do, particularly in the theater and the stage and the performance arts, and we have really just the beginning of our efforts. We didn't really know what running a theater was going to be like. I mean, we were kind of the school of hard knocks, where we have been just kind of figuring it out as we go along. But I think we've got it down really good. We have an amazing staff at North Fork Arts Center, and an amazing volunteer network of people who are advising us and working with us. And the nice thing is that we're really all on the same page, trying to be something significant and valuable for the community.
Yes. But when Tony was talking about it and you were involved with getting it started, were you thinking, when you had to raise the money to get the theater, what were you thinking? Were you thinking there was enough support in the community at that time? And did you think it was going to get off the ground within that year?
I never had any doubts. Okay. And basically Josh is a very smart guy, and he wanted us to have substance. So he said to Tony, you raise $1 million, not for me, for you. So the deal was, put $1 million in the bank for North Fork Arts Center, and I'll give you the theater. And we raised it in record time. Not only did we raise it in record time, but I think we've got like 700, 800, maybe 1,000 participants who gave us money for the theater, and it was overwhelming, the community support that we cherished.
Yes. And you mentioned the education programs, and you're on the board, but moving forward, are you involved with any of the classes or in the future?
I hope to be. As you know, my interest now is kind of like morphed into photography, and I'm totally all in with my own photography pursuits, and I'm hoping to build a photography program through the North Fork Arts Center that will serve the community. And that means, kids and adults, and I'm actually discussing and brainstorming and exploring how that would work. And, there's so many different ways that it can go, but it's really just one of many of the North Fork Arts Center's ambitious goals to serve the community.
Yes. And then I want to change topics and talk about the OspreyZone.
Oh, good.
Which is an interesting project which allows viewers to watch osprey nesting What inspired that?
Yeah, well, that's a great story too. Tommy Apri, unfortunately, we lost recently. But he was, I go back in history, as I mentioned, he was married to Shirley Wexler, who I grew up with the family and came out here. Originally coming out this way was really spending time with Shirley and Tommy. I mean, they treated me like family. They were family. And Tommy had a tower, a big tower that was originally a TV tower, because when Jerry Wexler built the house in East Marion, there was no cable. And he built this giant tower to get TV signals from the city. I don't know if it ever worked or not. I mean, we seem pretty far away. He probably picked up something from Connecticut. I don't know. But along the way, Tommy, who was a commercial fisherman, put a VHF antenna up there. And he had problems, I remember, with the town, because the tower was probably back then there was no permits for it. In fact, I think that was even before zoning, but now I'm mixing that up with Village of Greenport. Whatever. He had a big tower. And lo and behold, he saw ospreys up on the top of the tower. And he decided, totally without me, and him and Christina, his wife, up to his widow now, who he was married to at the time. Shirley passed away a while ago. Tommy put a camera and a platform. I think the platform first. I think he put the platform up on the top of this tower. We're talking a 60-foot tower, okay? Looks like a cellular tower or something. It's right behind his house. Later on, the one of the sections was removed to bring it down, but the tower held a platform, and I think right away there were ospreys that came to build a nest on the platform. And Tommy got the idea he was going to put a camera on the platform. And he did. He put a cool camera on the platform, and it was like it had a Wi-Fi address, but it had limitations. There's just so many people that could log onto it, like 2 or 3 people, 4 people at the most, and then the bandwidth would just deteriorate. And I said, well, Tommy, let's stream this. Let's bring this into. I think we used YouTube. And then let's open it up for as many people as we can. And he liked that idea. So I started out slow, and all I did was take that signal and start broadcasting it. And right around then, we had an osprey couple famous to our viewers called George and Gracie. And they started having babies. And, I was into building a website at the time. This must have been 15 years ago. In fact, I'm not sure how far it goes back. Maybe 2014.
Okay.
Maybe that was the first year, but it seems that it should go back longer than that. I'm not sure offhand. But anyway, I started building a website around this stream, and again, my computer abilities, and also by this time I had people working for my office who were real geniuses. I was really just like an old timer, man. It's hard to keep up with the technology, but I had a full-time programmer and I had a full-time geek in my office. So we put together OspreyZone.com, which was not only a live feed to the osprey nest, but we started collecting archival information. And what was really kind of valuable was we built a tremendous community that was very vocal. And every day it got to a point where I couldn't read all the comments every day. It was just too many of them. But in our heyday, and then I had this vision that it was going to help my tax reduction business. So it was the website was sponsored by Tax Reduction Services, and I always thought that I was going to get business. It was a ridiculous idea because when we finally hit our peak, we literally had 600 simultaneous viewers and 30,000 hits a day.
Wow.
Okay, but they were from all over the world.
Yes.
There was very few people from local. I shouldn't say very few people, but I would say 98% were out of my geography of where I did business.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a complete failure, very expensive, and I don't think TRS ever got really any benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a tremendous benefit. It was really rewarding and satisfying to give this to the community, because we started getting letters such as, I'm housebound in a wheelchair, and
Mm-hmm.
I watch your nest all day long. It's changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Tremendous feedback from the community. I still get people, thanking me for it. So that was really, I think, a valuable return on investment. I'm sitting on some, if anybody understands, some 40 terabytes of video.
Wow.
That I collected over the years. I've even got it backed up because I don't want to lose it. And if you go to the website now, OspreyZone.com, you can go through some of the archives. We have probably a couple hours of archival,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always envisioned like building I could easily find 24 hours of highlights
Mm-hmm.
out of this literally 6-7 years of live stream. And I've always wanted to give it. I offered it once to the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that they could just stream it. Peconic Landing at one point were streaming it to their people. I doubt they do it anymore because we don't have a live stream anymore. The problem was that the ospreys built their nest above the camera, and we made the decision not to mess with it in the middle of the season. And then, tell you the truth, I kind of lost interest in. It was taking a lot of time and a lot of energy and a little money, not a lot of money once it was all set up. But I really just let it go. And then Tommy passed away, so I don't even know if the camera is working anymore.
But it's still up there.
Yeah, it's probably still up there. But I doubt it's on.
Yeah, it's just become part of the Osprey.
Yeah. And but I still go to the website and look at the stuff that's on there. But I literally have I'd love to find some kid who wanted to go through all this footage and just really pick out the highlights and create hours and hours and hours of cool stuff and just give it away. I really just want to give it away because people got a lot of enjoyment out of it. There was a real dramatic moment when one of the ospreys got tangled in fishing line. And we had a lot of previous drama because in nature, siblings aren't always so nice to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems is that the osprey babies grow very fast. And if one baby is born 6 days in front of another baby, he's going to be twice as big as that one. Mm-hmm. And when there's not enough food, again, nature can be very cruel. They call it siblicide, a new term I learned along the way. And we had people threatening me personally if I didn't do something because they were watching this poor bird get abused by his big brother to the point where he died. But the community made a memorial for him. In fact, there's even there's a one of the videos on the website is a memorial to Pee-wee, they called him. But people got very entangled emotionally in these birds,
life.
Which was part of the lesson that I learned about how strong the media can be and how people can just get sucked into things. So I was constantly in touch with Cornell Cooperative Extension. There's some bird experts there, osprey experts, and a lot of times they chimed in and we put those on top of the comments. And the consensus was that you don't mess with nature. Okay, you just maybe the weak need to be bred out before they breed again. That was kind of the consensus. But when the ospreys got tangled up in a fishing line, that was a different story because that was a man-made thing.
Yes.
That was not a natural occurrence. So the consensus from the osprey gurus was, yes, you can fix this. So I got on the phone with, and there's a great video about this, by the way, called the Osprey Rescue. I got on the phone with Leica or whatever they're called now, and got them to come out, because the problem was this tower is 60 feet high, and you know, all my friends have, not all my friends, some of my friends have bucket trucks, and they have different ladders and stuff to get up there, but not 60 feet. In fact, they were 50 feet, 45 feet, 50 feet. So I called Leica, and they came right away with the big machine that they could get up 60 feet. And they brought a photographer, because they recognized this as a PR event. And there's an organization in Southampton. I wish I could remember their name and give them credit. They rescue animals and birds, and I forgot the name of them.
Oh, shoot.
But anyway, they sent a guy who was, knowledgeable about how to handle ospreys, and he went up in the bucket with the Leica guy, and detangled them. And the other thing he did that was really, you'll see in the video if you watch it, he cleaned the lens for me, because one of the problems we were having is that the camera was not positioned perfectly, and when ospreys, poop, they spray, and the camera lens was getting sprayed, and it was all cloudy. So I sent him up with some Windex, and I asked him to clean the lens, which is the first thing he did. So we got great video coverage of him taking the fishing line and all the other things. Ospreys bring all sorts of other garbage up to the nest. So he cleaned up the nest, and and then it was just a really tender and happy moment for everybody. And there's a great documentary on my website, short little clip about that.
But also, it's interesting, because it's almost like you were documenting the osprey, because I don't even know when they returned to the area, because they were almost like you couldn't find them.
Well, so on my website is a over the years I take on interns. Okay, I was taking on interns. This year I didn't. I'd love to find a photography guy who a kid who wants to do some editing with me. But so over the years I take on interns, and one year I had them do some osprey clips. So on my website is an introduction to the osprey, how amazing they are, very, very professionally done by my students. But more importantly is another clip, is the story of DDT. And the story of DDT is an incredible story, because it at one time meant the demise of the ospreys. All the ospreys died off because of DDT around here. And the story of the ospreys coming back is tied into the Environmental Protection Agency, and how they started here in Riverhead to protect the ospreys. And they fought a very hard battle, and they eventually won in court. They were first kicked out of court because the powers that be decided that the ospreys had no standing. But then they somehow or other they won in court, and then they lost on appeal. But by then the public sentiment was so strong that DDT was banned, legislatively. Anyway, you gotta watch it if you want to know the story of DDT. It's very short and very interesting. And then they came back, and then there's all sorts of efforts now to build more osprey nests. I don't even know if they're building anymore. There just seems to be so many. I know fishermen who complaining that there's less fish because there's too many ospreys. So that's the other that's the other side of this.
Yeah. No, but that's interesting. But also, you mentioned your passion for photography. Could you talk about how you got back into it?
Sure.
More recently.
Sure. Well, that's interesting, because actually the ospreys got me back into it. Because I'm a real gearhead when it comes to technology. I love technology, and I mean these cameras today are like badass computers. It's just amazing what these cameras can do. And I really wanted to take pictures of ospreys in flight. I was really looking to buy a camera with a big long lens, a quality camera. Always, all my life wanted it. Never could have afforded it. And I always wanted to take pictures of birds in flight. And I started doing that. And I bought a really nice camera and a really big lens. And I have a blog, by the way, that has all my photography on it. And it was so rewarding and so much fun that it just got me back into photography. And I started really appreciating my camera and shorter lenses. And now my big thing is street photography. I love walking around cities wherever I go and just taking pictures of people. Sometimes candid, other times, I'll interact with them. It's the connection with the people that I really am appreciating in terms of when I started thinking about taking photography and doing street photography. It was always kind of like, what a picture was, what an image says, and how it's crafted, and all the decisions that go into the creative process that makes pushing a button art. And I'm still kind of exploring that and trying to understand that, but I'm having fun, a lot of fun. With my photography. And, it was something that I thought would keep me off the streets, and actually it's put me back on the streets. So
yes, it gets you out exploring and talking with people.
Yeah. No, and I really hope to have an opportunity when I get a little more organized to put together a instructional, educational photography program here on the North Fork.
Yes. And I wonder if you could touch on just the art community out here. And there are a lot of artists and photographers out here, and it seems pretty close-knit with people that they know each other. Are you involved in that? And even I remember seeing you at the North Fork or the NOFO Art Collective.
Right. That's right. Yeah. No, I'm as involved as I can be. I'm really impressed with what's going on out here. I really feel privileged to be in a community and an environment that is so stimulating towards the arts. And it's a growing presence, I think. More and more people discover the North Fork, for better or for worse. But one of the betters is, I think, that we have gotten. I'm always amazed at all the talented, successful resources that come to the surface out here. It's just amazing who's out here. I mean, a lot of people are low key and they don't really want to be known, but it's just amazing. Every day I just keep on meeting more and more people that are really, I think, one of the things that makes the North Fork so valuable place to live.
Yes. And you've also been involved in various local civic matters, advocating for sustainable growth and development in Greenport.
Yes, I'm happy to share some thoughts about that because it's close to my heart. I think that I've watched this town come from what I described as a sleepy, run-down secret of a place to a very discovered, hot and heavy, desirable place where a lot of people with a lot of money have come out. And, one of the problems is that it's displaced a lot of the old-timers and their families, and a lot of people's kids can't even afford to rent, yet alone buy out here. And it's a real problem. And we're short of workforce space, which housing, which is definitely leading to a semi-trade parade. If anybody's tried to drive to Southampton in the mornings or take a look at the ferry line and you get an idea of what's going on in the Hamptons, because none of the people who work there can afford to live there. And it's a really big problem. And unfortunately, not every problem has solution sets that are manageable or make sense. I don't know what the solution set is here, but I kind of know, in my own opinion, what it's not. And I don't believe that building more hotel rooms or restaurants or more commercial space or multi-level parking in Greenport is an answer that makes sense. In fact, I really believe that this village needs to hold on to its traditional look and feel. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of development pressure surfacing. I think that there's 4 properties in Greenport that really depict its future. The waterfront properties, Claudio's, Preston's, the Shipyard, and Stid Systems. There's a lot of, I call them vultures, circling around trying to figure out how to make money off of this village, and I kind of resent it. And I really resent when people start talking about doing something for the community for affordable housing when they're really trying to line their pocketbooks. And there's a lot of that going around also. You know, there's a constant cry for property rights. People who buy commercial property, who think they have property rights to maximize the zoning on that land. That's not really the way it works. You know, that's why there's planning. That's why there's restrictions, and that's why you need special exceptions to rules, special permission to do things. As far as property rights go, it's my contention that everybody in the village, everybody who owns a residential house in the village has property rights too. They have property rights to voice their opinions. They have property rights to fight projects that they don't like or want. And there has to be some kind of a balance between development and the citizens of Greenport maintaining their traditional look and feel of the village. And this is something that I have been fighting for and very vocal about and will continue to be so. I loved the recent administration's implementation of the moratorium, and they followed suit with zoning that was consistent with what I consider to be a much more favorable future of the village of Greenport. And I applaud everything they've done, and I just hope that the next administration respects everything that has been done and all the people's wishes to maintain this village as something different than a bigger, bustier place.
Yes. No, because those are very big challenges, and there's not, like you said, for some of the answers in terms of housing and how we would address that, but it doesn't mean just changing the whole character of the village and like parking and
exactly
going above certain levels of the height restrictions and stuff.
Exactly. The developers, there's a lot of developers who come through and say, oh, we need this, we need that. We don't really want any of that. What Greenport really needs is not more people here on 4th of July weekend. I mean, we don't have any more capacity, and we shouldn't be making more capacity to have more people, more restaurants, more hotel rooms. I don't think that is a solution set that anybody really in the village wants, except the people who are going to make money from it. What we really need in Greenport is more uses like the North Fork Arts Center, which intends to bring people into the village off-season. We need to extend our season. We need to make sure that the village is hopping and full during the winter months, during the end of the fall and the beginning of the spring. And that's the kind of value that the North Fork Arts Center can bring to the community by bringing people in at night for events, for movies, for all the good reasons that they come and shop and eat in the restaurants. And I really believe that that's where we should be focusing.
Yes. And I think people have touched on that, where the types of stores that are in the area, like people have talked about wanting a store like the arcade to have an everyday items, and then even a hardware store, like White's hardware store that was here, and essential store things, not just for summertime tourist
Yeah,
type stores.
I know, I totally agree. I think that one of the problems is that I hear often that people think it's too late. We turned into a tourist town. Well, first of all, things can get a lot worse. Okay, I mean, it's true that we turned into a tourist town, and I don't know how you turn that around. I'm not even sure if you should, but I do know that things can get a lot worse. You know, we just need to balance our future with our control of it. And you know, my hat's off to the mayor of Greenport. He's, you know, there's several dramatic things going on in the Greenport Village politically, but I have to say that this current administration, they talk the talk and they walk the walk, and they did a lot of good things. Not everybody's happy with them, but you know, honestly, I don't think that Greenport should be run by the Business Improvement District. I think the village of Greenport needs to be balanced in their future and their control of their destiny, not steered by the shop owners, not steered by the developers, but there's a lot more residents in Greenport. A lot of them have come over the last 10 and 20 years, and you know, you hear a lot of this NIMBYism talk. Well, you know, I think that there is a lot of interest of the residents in Greenport, and you know, ultimately they will decide by who they vote for. So take heed, because the next administration could very easily undo all the zoning that is in place right now, and there are certainly people who think that Greenport should be built out further and should be developed, and you know, we just don't need that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then I think just lastly, I had a question. Just what we've touched on what you kind of hope for the future in the community, but you mentioned that you really enjoyed what Greenport was then. But what do you enjoy most about living out here today on the North Fork in Greenport?
You know, I love Greenport. I think that Greenport is just, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. If there was, I'd be there. I have to say that the recent influx of all the new people has really raised the bar in Greenport intellectually, and has, you know, it's just amazing to me the contrast between what Greenport is today and what it was 30 years ago. And it's not all great, but it's certainly not all bad. I have to say that, you know, that there's one of the things about Greenport is it has become a culinary destination, and I like that. I like to have all the options, and the restaurants are, you know, really doing a good job. And there's certainly you couldn't get a seat, by the way, over the weekend, the 4th of July weekend, which is, you know, I guess the dream of all the vendors. But one of the things that I think is really attractive from Greenport is the waterfront. Mm-hmm. The waterfront is probably as nice a place. I cruised on a big boat up and down the East Coast for many years, back and forth, and went to a lot of seaside towns. I never went anywhere that I thought was any nicer than Greenport. I mean, mm-hmm. from Maine to Florida and everywhere in between. Greenport's a really special place. And that's why it's really important to so many people to preserve and to define what's special. And you mentioned character, and I agree that the character, the traditional look and feel of this seaside village is essential to, I think, everybody's appreciation and love for it. And it's worth fighting for.
Yes. And then just lastly, I know we've touched on quite a few different things, but were there any last minute things you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't touched on?
Well, you know, listen, I really appreciate that you're doing this, and I recognize its value for, you know, I mean, I can't imagine that anybody's ever going to want to listen to my whole thing here. but you know, it's definitely, I think, privilege and honor to be part of Greenport. I've been here full-time for 40 years and part-time for, I think, almost 55 years. So I don't know if I'm really a local yet. I got a pickup truck and my kids went to school here. But, it's just been my pride and real, glory to be part of this village and this community and to have the friends that I have here. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere else I'd rather be.
Yes. No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your story and your continued involvement and love for the area.
Listen, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I wish you luck, and I look forward to seeing more interesting people on here, hearing more interesting people.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 197 with Paul Henry. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.